Hello, hello, hello out there. Welcome, everyone. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards. I am an award winning podcast producer, host, consultant, facilitator. I do all the things in the podcasting space, and I am super excited to be here with you all today, facilitating this conversation with Libsyn. We are doing podcasting, award winning podcasting tips, and today we are specifically talking about editing. Let me tell y'all how I have been wanting to have this conversation for a very long time. So I'm so thankful to Libsyn and Elsie, specifically over at Libsyn, for giving us a chance to, have this discussion. So I am joined today by two of the best. I'm talking hands down, two of the very best editors in the podcasting industry, Dominic Lawson and Jean-Claude Canal. Y'all, give them a virtual hand clap. If you in here, go ahead and clap, clap, clap. Give us some hands, some praise hands. Y'all need to be excited, okay? Because I am. I am extremely excited. Look at those smiles. Come on, come on. So welcome, Dominic. Welcome, Canal. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here with me today. How y'all doing?
We're good. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Very good on
Yeah.
this side as well.
Amazing, amazing. I'm looking over here at the comments. I see Paula is there. Hey, Paula. Y'all know Paula talk shit with people. Yes.
Absolutely. That's my
How
girl
are
right
you?
there.
No, Paula, yes. So we're not gonna, waste time because we only have an hour and there's a lot of information that we want to cover today. So let's go ahead and get started with some just introductions and kind of let the people know who you are and really at the end of the day, why they should give a damn about what you got to say today. Dominic?
Absolutely. So, my name's Dominic. I'm a multi-award winning podcast host, editor, and producer. I am host and creator of the show Black is America, where we tell little known African American figures, tell the stories of African American figures and other stories, little known stories. And also, I work for Meadows Behavioral Healthcare, which is one of the leading behavioral healthcare companies in the country. And there, I do the same role. Podcasting is my side job and my day job, and so there, I host, edit, and produce Beyond Theory, where we take on and talk about some of the top issues in behavioral health. It's almost kind of a Law and Order ripped from the headlines kind of approach to behavioral health, and also Recovery Replay, where we tell the story of a person's recovery from three different perspectives. And so I am so glad to be here with you, Latrice and Canal, and doing this with Libsyn. Really honored.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dominic. And Dominic is so humble, y'all. What he didn't tell y'all is that he's not just award winning. Dominic has won 22 awards for his work. And I was going to say podcasting awards, but it's really not just podcasting, like you have won awards in other media areas that are
Mhm.
connected to, podcasting, but it's not just podcasting. And can we also add that all 22 of them awards he won within the last 12 months? Come on. And just got nominated for an Ambie. Go ahead, Dominic. So that's why you all should really care about what he has to say today. And we are also joined by Jean-Claude Canal. Canal, go ahead and let the people know who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Latrice. Yeah, I'm Canal. I go by Canal. I am a specialist in children content, creating captivating soundscapes for them. I've won, just like Dominique, I am a multi-award winner as well, as far as the Webby's concerned, and the Ambies nominated as well. Um, I have worked with some of probably your favorite brands, from Starbucks to, I don't know, Toyota, Ben and Jerry, just to name a few. I have been podcasting for about 5 years, and within those 5 years span, I've done a lot of great work for a lot of great companies. So, yeah.
Yes, yes. And Canal is one of my faves. I'm gonna be honest. I am a huge, huge fan of your work. Canal works with ABF Creative. Shout out to Anthony and Wanda and the whole team over there. And he's just amazing. He does African folk tales with Miss JoJo, which is like, oh my God. I really think it's one of the best podcasts ever made. And I think it really does come down to the editing and the sound design. And so I'm so excited, Canal, to, just to have you here. I was like, I just feel like more people need to know your name, So I'm very thankful that you both have agreed to join me today. Um, let's go ahead and get started. The first one that I want to talk a little bit about is really like a foundational understanding of the impact of editing, right? Because I am a producer, but I am a producer who edits, right? Which is a thing. Okay, to all my producers out there, you need to have some foundational level or understanding of editing, right? And I do have that. But I don't think that a lot of people necessarily understand the real impact of editing and sound design on the overall quality of a show. So before we kind of like get into the tips and things like that, Dominic, talk a little bit about why the editing is so important to the overall presentation of the show, and just the final product.
Well, I think the first thing, Latrice, is that editing helps stories make sense, right? A lot of times when you listen to shows, there's a lot of, background noises and stuff like that. So there's that part of it up front. But also at the same time, when it comes to editing, it also allows you to tell the story that you want to tell, because I can have an audio piece that's an hour long, and based on where I want to put those different parts of the conversation can determine how I want to tell that story. Do I
Mhm.
want one person to be the villain or the hero? Do I want them to be seen as the expert or the person who's learning? And so editing really can go a long ways in determining the type of story or the type of content you're trying to convey to the listener. And so I learned pretty early on that you can kind of dictate what that looks like for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a critical piece of the whole puzzle because you can have the idea for what it is that you want to do, but the editing really brings it all together. And Canal, you tend to work with more scripted, which I know Dominic does scripted as well, but Dominic is the everything. Dominic is like me. Dominic, the editor, the producer, the host, the director, the sound design. Dominic does the whole nine yards, but you work with the team, Canal, right? And so the script is what the script is, right? And you want to try to stay as close to that script as possible. But I really do believe that in the editing process, the story kind of tells you what it wants to be. And so when you are working where you have like these, maybe let's say tighter parameters around what needs to be in the final product, how do you still allow yourself to have the freedom and the flexibility to kind of let the story guide you?
But that's a good question. I think, well, first things first, any project that I'm involved in, I typically am involved in the scripting process. So I may not be writing the scripts or anything like that, but I'm involved in that early on onset of process where, my input kind of help mold and shape the story or the podcast itself. So initially, I'm involved in that process. And when it comes down to the whole scripting, parameters and all of that stuff, I tend to have like a lot of the I guess the freedom that you mentioned, where if I need to make a creative decision, I'm allowed to do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, being involved in all the phases of production when you're a sound designer, I think that itself really lends to creating a great product.
It does. It really does. And I love the fact that you do get to participate in the script writing process because really the whole project kind of leans on your ear, right? And you can kind of, as you're scripting out and writing out the script, you can kind of say, that's not going to sound right, or this would sound more better, or this would flow better, this would sound a little bit more appropriate, so that the whole process from the beginning moves a little bit smoother, right?
Yeah, so and another point as well is just like, being a part of that early on process is kind of like helping the writers get their point across in an audio way. So it's easy to write. Well, let me not say it's easy, but it's more simple to write something that you think will sound good versus somebody being in there and having the mindset of like, okay, hey, if you're gonna do it this way, then let's do it this way so it could translate better in audio.
Absolutely, because that's a thing, right? Like that's a thing that something may read well in
Mhm.
terms of like in the black and white, but when you actually talk about somebody saying it and actually trying to communicate not just the words that are on the paper or on the page, but the emotion that is connected to that, right? Because storytelling always has emotion connected to it. And so it being like cognizant from the very beginning of what spoken word, the difference between written word and spoken word, and how that's going to translate. I love that. That's an amazing tip. Yes.
That actually
um
happens to me as well. And I even write the
yeah.
script like myself, right? Like sometimes I'll write it and like in my head it's like I want it to have a certain effect, but then I say it out loud, like, no, that's not what I meant. Or like even if like I'll say a certain word repetitively within a short time frame, like, okay, we need to use some synonyms and stuff like that. So that's definitely important when it comes to that process.
And especially
Yes.
when working with a team. Sorry to cut you off.
Right.
Just
No,
Oh,
working like everybody has their own, I guess, language when it comes to
correct.
when it comes to like trying to portray words into audio. A lot of the time, what is written is not what they meant.
Right.
yes.
So you got to make sure that that you stay on top of that.
Especially when you're like when someone has written a script for you, because I'm I do all the things as well, right? So like I started off as a solo podcaster, so for me the learning curve is learning how to work with the team and not having to be the one to do all the things. And Dominic and I worked on a project recently. Well, technically we still working on a project because I need to get my life together, but Dominic Dominic and I worked on a project recently where he wrote about 3 or 4 scripts for us, and I was hosting the project and producing the project, and I found that I was having some difficulty in communicating what like changes and corrections that I needed, and I think it's because I'm used to just doing it myself, like I'm used to just being the person who makes the edits. And so working with the team, and it's a skill that you really have to learn. But let's kind of talk a little bit more about communication when it comes to editing, right? Because if you are working on a team, or even if it's you yourself, acting as all of the different positions, you have the producer who kind of holds the vision for the project, right? So the producer holds the vision for what the project is, and it's their responsibility to make sure that it gets executed on appropriately, bringing in the right team members, making sure that you work with people who can give you what it is that you need, but then also communicating what the vision is. Talk a little bit, Dominic, about whether you're working with the team or working by yourself. How what are some of the difficulties that you people run into in terms of communicating the thing that you already hear in your head?
I think sometimes, and I run into this when I do my work at the Meadows. So at the Meadows, I'm basically the podcasting department, right? But we have an entire marketing team that I can lean on, right? So we have a senior communications director who, like is really good at like writing and getting a story across. And there's the social media person, and then there's the graphics person, right? And so sometimes as a podcaster, I have to lean on them for those things. And so sometimes in my head, it's like it's perfectly wound out, but the words coming out of my mouth doesn't make sense, right? And so sometimes what happens is what they'll do, they'll try to first get me to calm down and slow my brain down, and then they just start asking questions. And I think that's where the work in. When it comes to that building the rapport, building that cohesiveness, is to start asking questions like, okay, what are you trying to convey? At the end of the day, right? What are you wanting the audience to know, right? And then just working through that process and that conversation. But also, Latrice, I think an important piece is if you're the creative of that particular medium is being open-minded to those questions and also those changes, right?
Mhm.
Because whether it be with my work at the Meadows or somebody, we have a mutual friend in Crystal Hill, always, working with her and stuff like that, being open-minded to those changes and those things, like, you know what, there may be something I can work on. She was telling me something just yesterday, like, you know what? Because the thing is, like, you can be so in the creative process that you're not
Mhm.
that you get so stuck in there, right? And so you
Mhm.
need that outside approach. So I would just say, be open minded, ask those questions, and be open to that feedback.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. And I think it's something that unfortunately not enough people are really aware of or really think about when, hey, Crystal, look, Crystal in the chat. Shout out to Crystal Hill, the Crystal Hill. We love us some Crystal around here. But I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about because I think, like I said, I started off as a solo podcaster, right? So I was in my own little bubble. I didn't have to consider input from anybody else because I'm sitting in my living room as I am now, right? Some things never change, but I'm sitting in my living room and I'm just creating this thing from my head. So I think it up and then I make it happen. And so I never had to consider input from outside people. And so when I got in a position to be a part of a team and now have to consider input from other aspects, at first it was a little difficult for me because I'm like, no, I got the vision. I'm the one with the vision. But it does require a certain level of humility for you to be
Right.
able to say, I have this person here because of the expertise and the skill set that they bring to the table. And so maybe there's a blind spot that I have. Maybe they see something or they hear something that I have gone blind to, right?
Right.
So Canal, in that vein, um, still really talking about the communication piece of it, right? How do you go about engaging in those difficult conversations where you as the editor or sound designer are saying, I don't think this is what's best for the project, but the person in charge is saying, I hear you, but also do what I've asked you to do, right? How do
Yeah.
you go about that? Because as a editor, you're an artist, right? So there's a certain level, like I want to like the work that I put into the world. I want to feel good about it when I put it out there. And so how do you approach those kind of situations, and how do you reconcile that within yourself?
Yeah, I mean, like Erica Badu says, right? I'm an artist. I'm sensitive about mine. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's like, often enough, and I've had this happen before. But often enough, one of the things I always like say to myself is like, take a step back, breathe. It's not you. It's about the product. So
Mhm.
with that
Right.
stinging, it allows me to kind of like, again, do exactly what I'm saying, to take a step back and just really just do what's best for the actual podcast show.
Mhm.
And it's also, I guess, that's where like a little bit of the ego comes in as well. Uh,
Mhm.
because it's not that um, what you're doing is bad, right? It's not. It's most likely it's not. It's just not what the show needs to be as great as it could be. So
Mhm.
often enough, just taking a breath, breathing, take a moment and reflect. No, it's not you, and kind of like move on. And
Yeah.
the longer you stay on it, the more angry you're gonna get. So, the quicker you move on, the better it gets, the faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the part I
Absolutely.
have to work on often because it's the ego piece because you've been doing it for so long by yourself, right? And people say these great things about you, but there are times where there are these blind spots, right? And so sometimes you definitely have to check that ego, as me and my therapist often talk about. So
Listen, I was looking last night, trying to schedule an appointment with my therapist. We got some things to talk about, she and I. But one of the things that I try to do in terms of like just kind of self-correcting and self-checking is, I put it down for a couple days, right? Because you can kind of go ear blind to it, right? Like you're not when you spend so much time in the editing process. I don't know about y'all, but when I edit, it can take me anywhere from 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours, depending on whatever the thing is and how really detailed I want to get, which I'm a very detail oriented person. So I always opt for more detail. But after listening to the same audio for such an extended period of time, there are things that you miss. And so I kind of get it to the place where I'm like, okay, I think this is ready. And then I put it down for, a day. If I have a day to give, then I'll put it down for a day. If I have 2 or 3 days, ideally, then I'll put it down for 2 or 3 days. And then I come back and I kind of listen again with fresh ears, right? And so when I listen again with fresh ears, it gives me an opportunity to reset and to hear things that maybe I had been missing and to really add those fine tuning details. And so, that's what works for me. And maybe it might work for someone else. I want to take a little bit of a pivot here and really start getting into some editing techniques, right? The two of you are really such dynamic editors, and the projects that you all have put forth are just so different in so many ways, right? So the thing that drew me in Canal about African folk tales with Miss JoJo is that it's very busy because it's a children's show, right? It's very busy from literally from the minute you press play. There is something going. There's sounds, there's elephants, there's giraffes, there's music, and then there's a special little chime when they say the special word. And then you got Miss JoJo is talking and she's telling the story, and you can hear the grass blowing in the background. I mean, it is busy, but it works so well together that you as the listener do not feel overwhelmed. And that is a skill set to be able to do that, right? On the other hand, Dominic, I'm talking right now specifically about Black is America. It's a little bit more slowed down. There is constant stimulation because you have the soundboard in the background. You have the voiceover with the story and things like that, and every now and then you hit us with a little sound effect, right? Which I definitely appreciate. But it's a lot more of a calming kind of experience where you can really settle in and kind of just tune into the story. One of the things that both of these two styles, even though they're so different, that really stood out to me or stands out to me is the use of silence. Right now, y'all know I am a therapist by trade. And so, I'm all about the listening and communication experience. I literally talk for a living. Silence to me is one of the most underused tools in the podcasting industry when it comes to editing and things like that. Both of you utilize silence rather, but you use it in very different ways. Dominic, we'll start with you. Talk a little bit about your use of silence and what that silence means and looks like, because it's not always, or it doesn't always have to be complete silence, right? There's
Right.
varying versions of silence. Talk a little bit about your use of silence as a technique in your editing.
So usually it depends on what kind of story I'm telling or the ending point of a story, because there are times where it makes sense where I'm telling the story of a guy on Blueford, right? You know, we just released that episode of Black is America a few days ago. I'm telling the story of Guy on Blueford, and I'm trying to, you know, as I'm like the narrator, I'm trying to give you this information, but also I'm like a fanboy, like cheering him on, right? So there's a moment where I'm talking about, you know, Godspeed, Uncle G, Godspeed. So I turn from narrator to fanboy, and so I want the music and the sound of his rocket going up, right, where I just go silent, right?
Mhm.
You know, and so sometimes you just let the music bed and the sound bed kind of do the work for you, and it's telling the story on its own. You've already set the framework of what you're trying to convey. You've already told most of the story. And so sometimes you just let the sound itself of silencing your voice to tell the complete end of that segment. Or
Mhm.
sometimes it'll be the flip side where, you know, I may have to tell a really sad story when it comes to somebody passing away, if you will.
Mhm.
In that same story, I'm telling the story of Milton Olive III and the Medal of Honor recipient. So I let the music go silent as well as my voice as well, because I want you to kind of sit in and just memorialize you know, this person we just talked about. And sometimes we just need to have that silence to let the audience just kind of sit and breathe with what just happened in
Mhm.
that moment. And sometimes I think as podcasters, as editors, we have all these tools and we have
Mhm.
all these sounds at our disposal, and we feel like, oh, we have to kind of justify our wages a little bit, to kind of quote a video game. We feel like we have to justify having these tools, and so I got to use every bit and piece of whatever. And so my job on Black is America, when I use those sound effects and things like that, is just to act just enough to activate the theater of the mind, just enough
Mhm.
to make you feel like you're in the tower with John Fox, just enough to make you feel like you're in the race car with the Wendell Scott. And so it's very timely. And there's times where I'm so in it to where I need somebody from the outside looking in. It's like, hey, maybe we can, you know, make that silence just a little bit longer to kind of sit with that, if you will. But you know, that juxtaposition of the silence and the work itself can be very powerful if you allow it. And I wish more podcasters would use that silence to their advantage.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, especially like this, the idea of sometimes you just need to give the audience a chance to receive
Right,
what
because
has just been,
you
yeah.
just pack them with so much information. Sometimes you got to let that marinate, as we say in our community. You got to let that marinate, you
You
know,
know,
a little bit. You know what I mean? And because you just hit
yeah.
them with something pretty heavy, right? You know, especially when I do my work at the Meadows and we're talking about addiction and recovery and stuff like that, and you're talking about some of that work that this person is doing, and they just dropped a bomb on you, and right, you got to like sit with that
Mhm.
for a minute. And as a person who's doing the editing, sometimes I have to go away from that work and just kind of sit with what just happened and take a break from it as well. So there's so much power in the silence, if you will, that, like I said, I wish more podcasters would take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. We gotta let that thing marinate,
Gotta let it
let,
marinate a little bit.
gotta
Yeah.
let it marinate. I like
Because
that
it
word.
can
I
be
like the
so
word
heavy.
marinate.
It can be so heavy, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta let it got to ease off a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Canal, you wanted, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I was just gonna add a couple more things. I mean, he Dominique pretty much said everything. He covered pretty much all the bases. But from a children content perspective, I think the usage of silence is best used when you're trying to really getting the audience, the children, a moment to understand what is being said to them.
Mhm.
It's similar to how take the approach of like when you go visit a classroom, maybe like a kindergarten classroom, you see the teachers talking at a different rate, but after every sentence, it's like a pause. So like just to make sure that you understood what I just said. Um, you know, I think that the use of silence itself is very powerful on a lot of different levels. Kind of like what Dominic said about the emphasis on silence can emphasize, the drama in a series, or empathy, right? Or a whole bunch of different emotions that, a sound effect can't convey. Um, so yeah.
I think you're on mute, Latrice.
Sorry about that. All
No
right.
worries.
Um, my bad. With I was agreeing with you, and I was saying with the work that you do specifically, Canal, like with the children's stories, right? Your your goal ultimately is to maintain their attention, right? And we know that children have a much shorter attention span than adults, although I know there's some of y'all out there that's on the struggle bus. Okay, let's just be real. It is what it is. It's a judgment free zone, but you know who you are. Okay, but for children, your use of silence has to be much more exact, right? Like it has to be much more exact, much more intentional, because you really do risk losing their attention if you're not using that correctly. And so I love, the difference between Dominic's kind of, explanation or use of silence for a primarily adult audience, and then Canal's use of silence for a primarily youth audience, really kind of illustrates one, that silence as a tool and as a technique can be used no matter what it is that you're creating, first and foremost, but two, that you need to consider your audience,
Mhm.
right? And the experience of the audience in
Yeah.
your use of that silence. And I really do appreciate that. So Canal, I talked a little bit about how busy
Mhm.
your projects tend to be, but they're busy in the sense that it's a lot going on, right? But it doesn't feel overwhelming to the ear, which in and of itself is a skill, because we have all heard podcasts where it's just like, girl, I don't know what to pay attention to. It is entirely too much going on. I have turned off podcasts because I'm just like, I cannot do this. This is, it's too much happening. So knowing how to layer, right? So we're moving on to the next skill of layering, knowing how to layer your sounds in the editing so that the listener does not feel overwhelmed by them, is, I think, a technique that takes some time to master. Talk, and you do it so beautifully. You really do. You do it so beautifully. Talk a little bit about what the process of layering looks like for you, and in your work, and how you're able to achieve such a harmonious and cohesive sound, even though there's really a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah. First things first, I think in any project that you're working on, the dialogue comes first, right? So if you're working with one person that's telling a story, then their dialogue comes first. Their story comes first, and then everything else is just supporting that story. So that's usually my approach to every episode that I work on. Is, dialogue typically is in the center and everything supporting it, and then we layer it with some um, ambiance noise, really trying to convey the location of um, the episode, whatever, whichever it is, and then we do um, a lot of sound effects where it's always a surprise. So it's not coming from the same place every single time. So you essentially don't know where it's coming from, and it's catching you in a way where it's not like, oh, I'm expecting it, So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach when you talk about like African folktales, especially. Um, I think every story is detailed out in a specific location. Based on that location, then we find certain sounds that goes with um, the story, and then we kind of just build it from there.
I love that. And I'm going to ask Dominic this question as well, but I want you to answer to this first, Canal. One of my biggest pet peeves in the editing process is when people have the music, right? Or like the floor is way too loud and you can't even, like you said, the audio is the most important part. I mean, it's a podcast. The
Yeah.
audio always has to take precedence, right? But we try to get fancy and we be wanting to zhuzh the thing up, which I am all here for the zhuzh, okay? But when the music is overpowering or fighting, as I like to say, it's fighting the audio, it makes for a very difficult listening experience for the recipient on the other end of that. Talk a little bit about how you layer your sounds, the volume of your sounds, so as to not make sure so to make sure that everything is heard, like everything that you want to be heard is heard, but it's not so overwhelming that it's now competing with something else.
Yeah. So if we're talking about, again, it depends on the podcast and how many people's involved. But let's just say one host is telling a story similar to like African folk tales. Typically, there isn't like a rule of thumb where we say, okay, let's put this track at a certain dB, right? It's what feels the best. Um, However, there is some things that you can do to make sure that you're not, overdoing it. Number one, making sure that you're looking at your meters. When I say meters, I mean the master meter, um, to make sure that you're not going over a certain dB when you are adding the music. Number two, EQing, I think, in this part is very important because when we're talking about frequencies fighting each other, this is where the vocal range could fall anywhere from like 1K to 3, 4, 5K, um, and you don't want your sound to really be occupying that space. So EQing, I think that helps a lot. Whether it's a dip around those frequencies or you're doing a mid-side EQ, that's kind of like one of my favorite things to do is like send the um, the music track into like a mid-side where it allows the vocal to just sit center and all the attention is on it.
Absolutely. I'm still learning some of them words. Like I said, I told you I'm a producer that edits, okay, which is very different, I think, than being an editor. So I don't always know the right terminology, but I know what it is I'm looking for. I know what I'm trying to hear or what I'm not trying to hear,
This is
for
why
that
some people
matter.
can be involved in the beginning stages. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. We're gonna have to do like a editing dictionary, like a glossary or something like that that we'll like attach to this, and I'm gonna make sure I get the first copy because I don't be knowing. I don't be knowing. But Dominic, so you do more traditional storytelling, and traditional, I mean, like traditional to podcasting, right? So
Mhm.
you do more traditional style storytelling in your projects. You have a music base that kind of goes through the entirety of the show, right? Um, One of the things that I always struggle with is during the times that I'm not talking, how do I want to raise the music there? Do I not want to raise the music there? Like like dealing with the volume, but also not necessarily just about the volume. I think it's more about the telling of the story and the calling attention to whatever it is that I want the audience to call attention to. We talked about the silence. We talked about this idea of like utilizing silence as a tool and as a technique. And so the leveling of the sound bed. I hope I'm asking this question appropriately or that it just makes sense. Talk to me a little bit about what your process is when you are adding your sound bed to your story. to make sure that that music is not distracting from what the intention of what you're trying to present is, but that it's just supporting it and kind of giving it a little bit of a lift.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's kind of like what Canal was saying earlier, and I'm not an audio engineer by by any standard, but one of the things I do is just play around with the music. So maybe, and the thing is, certain songs or whatever or music beds, they're different, right? They have different frequencies and all the things. So something that may work well at 11 dB may not work well as 7 dB, right? So sometimes, like, and it also depends on the tone of the story at that time. So like I may need to show a little bit of reverence, like we did in the episode with Dory Miller. We told the story of a young man who was hung from a tree as a 17-year-old. And so I wanted to show a little reverence. So I'm going to lower that music even further than normal just to show that little reverence, like just enough to hear it, but also at the same time, just to give you the feel of what I'm talking about as well. But sometimes when I want to help tell that story, I'll take my voice out. I may raise the sound bed just a little bit just to kind of give you a sense of the intensity. But again, it really is a feel for me, right? And again, not all music is created equal, and so it just depends on that moment in my voice at the time. So and what kind of story I'm trying to relate to the audience.
Absolutely. And I think you have presented us with a really great segue in terms of talking about trusting your gut as the creative, as the person who has the vision, as the person who's charged with the responsibility of executing the vision, as the editor, sound designer, et cetera, et cetera. Um, for me, I've always said from the very beginning that podcasting is healing. It's a healing art form. And I really believe that because that has been my own personal experience. I believe that it is healing for the listener. It can be healing for the listener. But I really believe that it is healing and can be healing for the podcaster themselves, like the people who work on it in the background. And the reason why I say that is because utilization of personal creativity requires you to have a certain level of trust in yourself, right? And as I started branching out to not just working on like my own projects, but now working on projects for other people where I'm producing a show, with the Cube, or I'm, producing a live episode for Black Women Stitch, Stitch Please podcast. Like I'm doing stuff for other people now. I found myself kind of falling into the trap of like, how would so and so do it, right? Because it's different. It's not mine. It's not an original idea that I came up with in my own head, and I kind of felt like I needed to give them something that I've heard somewhere else, or something that might be like an industry standard, if you will, right? And I really had to learn how to trust my own instincts when it came to, you know, putting those sounds together. And that's in the edit of the original tape and kind of cutting the story together. But then that's also in the embellishments and the sound design and all of those extra things. Like I had to learn how to trust myself. And that was a journey. It was a serious journey, right? So Canal, talk to us a little bit about going on that journey of learning how to trust yourself and to trust your creative intuition when it comes to the editing process.
For me, trusting myself always came from preparation. Um, I've always been prepared, whether it's like putting the extra work just to learn certain techniques, or trying something new or something that I saw. It's always about, as an audio engineer slash sound designer, it's all about um, trying new things, right? Taking a leap of faith, and the more podcast shows that you do, the more confident you are in your ability, right? especially when they start getting accolades. So it's like, you're doing something right. But the journey itself, I think the best thing to do when you are facing troubles like that is just to be prepared and just doing the extra work, just to get yourself in a level where you are very confident in what you're doing and what you're putting out. Because at the end of the day, the people that are reaching out to you and going to you for your expertise is believes in you, So you definitely have the talent if somebody's coming to you. So it's just a
Right.
matter of just like um, being confident in what you're doing. And
Yeah,
the best way to get confident to me is just putting that work. Once you're ready, you ain't got to be ready.
listen, they say you got to stay ready, so you ain't
Yep.
never got to get ready, right?
Right.
But being consistent and like engaging in the craft and spending time practicing and
Yep.
just playing around with things and not being afraid to fail. I think you're absolutely correct in that. Dominic, you mentioned earlier, and still along these same lines, you mentioned earlier Crystal Hill, and I know that Crystal has been a huge, like a really great mentor for you throughout your podcasting career, and helping you to kind of shape, who you are, who you want to be in this space, right? Talk a little bit about, so it's a twofold question. I want you to talk about the power of mentorship in helping you to shape your style, while also talking about the development of your style, if that makes sense, right? Because a mentor, I think, um, can teach you a lot of things, but they can't tell you who you are
Right.
in this space. They can't tell you how to do the thing that you do best, but they can support you in a lot of different ways. So, talk to us a little bit about the development of your own personal style in your editing and in your production, and how your mentorship has supported you in the development of that style.
Sure. So, I mean, with mentors like Crystal and others, again, it starts with the conversation. Who do you want to be in this space? How do you want to go about in this space? And I've told her, listen, I want to be one of the best to ever do it, and I want to tell these type of stories in this kind of way, this, that, and the third. And so, what Crystal has done, over time and time again, is to allow me to be me while also at the same time just giving me some of those foundational pieces, right? Like she understands that like I'm not an audio engineer. She understands that like I didn't go to school for like broadcasting any of this. Like this is literally just a love of the game. So what she does and does really well is to give me what I like to say is a playpen to play in. It's a really large playpen, but but the playpen has boundaries, right? And so once I start to go outside those boundaries, that's you like, okay, let's rein it in and let's reconsider this part of it, right? So again, she allows me to kind of be me, but also within the framework of being consistent and doing that work and also trying new things, right? Kind of what Canal was saying earlier, right? Because a lot of my podcasting career was just honestly trial by fire and trying things and trying things and trying things, right? And so I think sometimes a great mentor like a Crystal can see kind of raw talent, and you don't want to overcoach them, but you just want to give them just enough to kind of stay who they are, but also at the same time give them some of those foundational pieces. And I think that's why our relationship works and why I've been able to have a little bit of the success that you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. And, I know this is a total Crystal Love Fest, or at least it's turning into a Crystal Love Fest. But I have had moments where like I will send Crystal my feedback. Like I'm was working with the editor and I was just really having a hard time getting on the same page with the editor. And I said, look, I need you to read over my feedback that I gave and tell me, am I not communicating well? Is there something that I could do better? And you're absolutely right. She does that. She gives you that feedback. She gives you that correction. But she does it in a way that does not ask you to change who you are. And I think that really is the marker of have a great mentor. And I think that everyone should have a mentor. Your mentor doesn't have to be someone who, works at a big company, or someone who doesn't. I see Isaac has a question. Isaac said, how does one locate a good mentorship? I think it starts in communication, communicating with other people, networking with other people, finding someone whose work you admire and saying, hey, I admire your work. you know,
Right.
um, yeah, like I admire your work. How can we, I would love to, just get to know you a little bit better, and make it something that's very, very genuine, and from the heart. And I think in a lot of ways, for me anyway, mentorship has just kind of developed naturally. Um, before we get out of here, we have about 10 minutes left. And I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to let us know about your projects that you have going on, or how people can get in touch with you. But before we leave today, I want us to talk a little bit about platforms and different, you know, systems and processes, right? Some real tangible kind of things that can help someone who may be tuned in right now, or maybe tuned in the future. Actually, if you're watching this on a replay, go ahead and comment hashtag replay so we can know that you came late. Okay, but that's all right. And we're going to say, hey, but talk to us a little bit about what systems you can put in place or utilize as an editor to improve your skills, your techniques, and to just, make you a better editor, regardless of what your primary role is. Canal, we'll start with you.
Um, Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Absolutely. We're talking about systems and platforms and tools that individuals can utilize if they're interested in improving their editing skills.
Ah, system and plan. Okay, well, I think one of the most underrated thing that probably older engineers probably don't do is write things down. I know I'm a victim of this because I just jump into things right into the platform itself, and start playing around, right? So I think if you start planning what it is that you're going to do, you would have a better outcome in the whole thing. Because typically, when you're the engineer on a project, you're probably dealing with like upwards of most projects probably upward of 20 to 30 tracks, right? I've dealt with a lot of the projects I've dealt with like 50 to 70 plus tracks, and it could be a bit overwhelming. So what I tend to do is put a plan in place where it's like, all right, I know this is the what I'm working on, how many people stories how many voices I'm working on. Then I'll figure out, all right, how many tracks would I ideally probably need to bring this to life, right? Then I'll have that set up. Um, you know what um, what is needed, what's the location, like pretty much write all the little details that you can about a project that you're working on, or an episode that you're working on, and then going into the actual software itself, and then start putting the project together. I think that's definitely one of the things that can help somebody for sure in any phase of the project. Is just planning. As far as like tools, I feel like YouTube is a great teacher. If there's something you don't know, YouTube probably already have a video on it. Even I catch myself going to YouTube sometimes as well, like just to like, hey, I haven't done this in like 2 years. Let me go back and see how it's done again, and then once I do it, it's like, oh, I know this. Let's just go right back into it. But I think there's a lot of resources out there where people don't necessarily have to go to, a major school or something like that. Even though I went to like SAE, which is like a trade school for audio engineering. Um, but it's not necessarily needed. There's a lot of resources out there that teaches people a lot of different things, especially the software that you buy nowadays usually come with like a academic program. They'll teach you everything on the software, in which you could probably translate to another. Yeah,
And speaking of YouTube, I mean, we on YouTube right now, so
yeah,
like you get this education on
exactly.
YouTube, right? So just go on and do a search. But I do love the utilization of YouTube. Like I YouTube everything. Like it don't matter what it is. Sometimes I don't even know what the thing is that I'm trying to figure out. So I'll just type out the whole full description of the thing and see what YouTube gives me. And then I'm like, oh, that's what that's called. Okay. So even, helping us improve our vocabulary. Dominic, same question. What
Mhm.
systems, resources, tools, things like that, can, an individual utilize to improve their editing skills?
Sure. So, as a graduate and cum laude of YouTube University, I'm not definitely not going to go against that one. That's definitely a great resource as well. But to also add on to what Canal said, as far as the planning piece, in particular, the power of using transcribing your audio, right? If you get an interview or something like that, transcribe it, but also from there think about what story you're trying to tell, even if it's a chat show, if you will, because what may was said at minute 47 make more sense at minute 25 in the end product piece of the work. And so I love to do that whole like Minority Report situation with my audio and that transcription. So when you transcribe your audio and look at the words, look at the actual words that's being said, I think from there you have more insight than just editing from a linear perspective, because I think, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, it allows you to take the same audio and tell different type of stories. I'm definitely a fan of like non-linear storytelling, so I think using the transcription not just for the purpose of SEO and show notes, but using it as a point of plan for editing can definitely go a long way and allow you to tell multiple stories from the same audio.
I love that. Even as a producer, you can ask anybody that I've worked with. Um, as the producer, I always get the first cut, right? So I always make the first cut of the tape, no matter what it is. And that's because I really, really enjoy the process of crafting and curating the story. And that's really kind of what you're talking about, Dominic, is it's not just about, like, before we put all the finishing touches on it and making it sound good and all of those things. We have to tell the story first, right? Like the meat
Right.
of the story. And that is my favorite part of the entire process, because you really can craft the story into whatever it needs to be. And like I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of letting the story tell you what it is. And I think
Hmm.
when you tune in to the words, as you're saying, like you really kind of hone in on the actual words that are being used, sometimes you will find that the thing they said at minute 45 actually makes more sense, or it tells a better story if we move it up to like the first 15 minutes, right? and
Correct.
and then we loop back around to the last part. Like I will split a sentence in four. I have split one sentence into four different sections, and I was so proud of it because it did what I needed it to do. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what Canal was saying earlier. Like the voice part is that's the meat and the potatoes of it all. And so every sound design, every music bed begins and ends, start begins there. Because if it doesn't make sense, then it just doesn't make sense. And so that voice and the story you're telling has to start there. And so the sound design, sound effects, whatever, begins after that part is corrected and put in place in what kind of story you're trying to tell.
Absolutely. And so, one last little tool that I'll give you all, one of the, my favorite tools that I utilize in terms of just like, I like for it to sound clean and, put the finishing touch on there. I use Auphonic. Auphonic is an amazing, amazing, amazing production tool that can help you as you're learning, as you're growing. I'm not a Dominic, I'm not, a Canal, but I still, and I can't afford, Dominic and Canal, but I still want to put forth a quality product. And Auphonic helps me to be able to do that because it automatically levels and, it just kind of makes everything sound right, and the way it cleans it up and it enhances and all of that. And it's extremely affordable. They have a free version and then you can purchase additional. Yes, it is, Kim, Auphonic, Auphonic. It's an amazing tool for beginning editors, right? Because you can get it to, where you can get it to, right? And then Auphonic allows you to kind of elevate it and take it to the next level. And this is not a paid, advertisement, although holla at me,
Yeah.
Auphonic. Yeah, holla at your girl, because I am a real life user and I love Auphonic. But it's a good tool to help you to elevate your skills when you're still in the learning process. So that's all we have for y'all today. I want to say thank you so much to Dominic and to Canal for joining us today. Kimberly posted in the chat 3 stellar podcast professionals, and I'm gonna amen that, okay, because I just am so in awe of the two of you. I have so much respect for your work, and what you have put out into the world, and like listening to y'all stuff make me want to be better, and so I'm very, very appreciative of both of you kind of showing up the way that you do, and creating content for our community that is that cannot be rivaled. It just cannot. It's in a class of its own. So thank y'all so much. It's been such an honor to talk to y'all today. Dominic, go ahead and let the people know where they can reach you, how they can get in touch with you if they want to work with you or to listen to any of the projects you've put out.
Sure thing. Again, thank you again, Latrice and Libsyn, for this opportunity. Also, Canal, definitely great to collaborate with you in this matter. You can reach me on Instagram, the real Dominic Lawson. Post content there all the time, but also on LinkedIn as well, just first and last name, just as simple as that. Please go and check out Black is America. Give us a 5-star review, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts. That would be great. And also check out shows for the Meadows, Beyond Theory. We just wrapped up season 6 today. So Beyond Theory as well. And then Recovery Replay should be picking up in May this year. So check that out as well. If you love stories of people coming and going through recovery process and feel like you can relate. So definitely check out Recovery Replay, recoveryreplay.com.
And if you are a member of the Podcast Academy, vote for Dominic and Black is
Please
America.
do. Please do.
Yes,
Please vote for
yes.
Black is America in the
Please vote for
DIY
Black.
category. Really appreciate your vote,
Yes, there
GPA.
you go. There you go. All right, Canal, let the people know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, first and foremost, shout out to Libsyn, shout out to Latrice. Dominique, it was a pleasure. You could follow me and reach me on IG. That's X Canal X. Also on LinkedIn, JC Canal. I also have my website, audiobycanal.com, where you can see some of my work on all different aspects of audio.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Once again, everybody, my name is Latrice Sampson Richards. You can find me on Instagram at Latrice Sampson Richards. I'm on TikTok at Rich by Marriage. And I'm on Facebook, but I don't really be on Facebook for real, for real. So if you're trying to get me, go to Instagram or go to TikTok. I want to say thank you once again to Libsyn, Elsie, Corey, Brian, everybody behind the scenes. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And to everybody who tuned in, y'all stayed from start to finish. Okay. Y'all was like, we gonna get these tips. And we love you for it. We appreciate you so much. That's all we have for y'all today. As always, we love y'all and we appreciate y'all. And until next time, be well. Bye.
What would you do different?